The harsh Wyoming wind tore at Rosalie O'Keefe's threadbare shawl as the stagecoach rumbled to a stop in front of Riverton's only hotel, a two-story wooden structure that had seen better days. April 1878 had brought unseasonably cold weather to the frontier town, but the chill in the air was nothing compared to the icy fear gripping her heart. She clutched her small carpetbag containing everything she owned in the world and stepped down into the mud, her boots sinking slightly as reality settled heavy upon her shoulders. "Miss O'Keefe," the driver handed down her single trunk. "This is Riverton, your intended should be waitin' inside." His voice carried a note of sympathy that made Rosalie's cheeks burn. She nodded her thanks, lifting her chin with what remained of her dignity. 22 years old, orphaned, and now a mail-order bride to a man she'd never met, a man who'd sent for a wife through an advertisement in the Philadelphia Matrimonial Times. She'd had little choice after her parents' death left her with mountains of debt and nowhere to turn. The hotel's front door swung open, and a tall man in a worn duster stepped onto the porch, his eyes scanning the new arrivals. Even from a distance, Rosalie could see he wasn't what she'd expected. Younger, perhaps 30, with a weathered face that spoke of days under the relentless western sun. His dark hair curled slightly beneath his wide-brimmed hat, and when his gaze finally found hers, she felt something unexpected, a flicker of warmth in eyes the color of summer sky. "Miss O'Keefe," he asked, approaching and removing his hat in one smooth motion. "I'm Yates Quinn, Mr. Quinn." She extended her gloved hand, noting how his calloused fingers dwarfed hers when he took it. "Welcome to Riverton." His voice was deep but gentle, like distant thunder without the threat of storm. He glanced at her meager possessions, his expression unreadable. "Is this all you've brought with you?" Rosalie swallowed hard, fighting the urge to apologize. "Yes, I'm afraid I don't have much. Your letter mentioned some difficulties back east." "My parents died of influenza last fall," she explained, the words still painful to speak aloud. "The debts they left. I sold everything of value to pay what I could." Yates nodded slowly, studying her face. There was no pity in his gaze, only a quiet understanding that somehow made her stand a little straighter. "I came with nothing but hope, Mr. Quinn," she admitted, her voice barely audible above the wind. His eyes softened, and the corner of his mouth lifted in the ghost of a smile. "Then that's worth more than gold, Miss O'Keefe." The simplicity of his response nearly undid her. After weeks of travel, of wondering what awaited her at the end of her journey, his words were the first that had made her feel something other than fear. "I've taken a room for you here," he continued, gesturing toward the hotel. "You'll stay until the wedding. I thought you might want some time to adjust before coming out to the ranch." Relief washed over her. "Thank you, that's very considerate. We'll marry on Saturday if that suits. That's 4 days from now." He lifted her trunk effortlessly. "The preacher comes to town once a month, and he's due then." As they walked toward the hotel entrance, Rosalie felt eyes upon them, curious glances from townspeople eager to see Yates Quinn's mail-order bride. She kept her gaze forward, determined not to show how much their scrutiny unnerved her. "My sister Rachel will come by tomorrow," Yates said as they entered the lobby. "She's eager to meet you. You have family here," just Rachel and her husband Thomas. "My parents passed some years back." He set down her trunk near the front desk. The ranch was theirs, been keeping it going since. The lobby was modest but clean, with worn leather chairs and a pot-bellied stove radiating welcome warmth. An older woman with steel-gray hair appeared from a back room, her sharp eyes taking in Rosalie's appearance with undisguised interest. "Mrs. Holloway, this is Miss O'Keefe," Yates said. "She'll be staying until Saturday." "Welcome to Riverton, miss." Mrs. Holloway's smile was genuinely friendly. "We've been wondering when Mr. Quinn's bride would arrive." "Thank you," Rosalie managed, acutely aware of her rumpled traveling clothes and tired appearance. "I'll leave you to get settled," Yates said. "The dining room serves supper at 6. I'll return tomorrow afternoon if that's acceptable." "Yes, of course." He nodded, replaced his hat, and with a polite tip of the brim headed for the door. Just before exiting, he turned back. "Miss O'Keefe." "Yes, I'm glad you're here." Then he was gone, leaving Rosalie to wonder what kind of man she'd agreed to marry. Mrs. Holloway showed her to a small but comfortable room on the second floor. The moment the door closed, Rosalie sank onto the bed, exhaustion overtaking her. She hadn't realized until now how tightly wound her nerves had been, how every mile of the journey west had been marked by doubt and uncertainty. Yet Yates Quinn wasn't what she'd feared. There was a steadiness to him that calmed her racing thoughts. Not handsome in the conventional sense, perhaps, but with a quiet strength that seemed more valuable than good looks. His kindness in arranging separate accommodations before their wedding spoke of respect she hadn't dared to hope for. After washing the travel dust from her face and hands, Rosalie unpacked her few belongings: 3 dresses, undergarments, her mother's tarnished silver hairbrush, and a small volume of Tennyson's poetry that had been her father's. At the bottom of her trunk lay her wedding dress, the only fine thing she still possessed. She ran her fingers over the ivory silk, wondering if Yates Quinn would think her beautiful when she wore it. Morning brought bright sunshine and a knock at her door just after breakfast. Rachel Quinn Miller was younger than her brother, perhaps 25, with the same startling blue eyes but a more open countenance. "I'm so pleased to meet you," Rachel said, embracing Rosalie warmly. "Yates has been absolutely closed-mouthed about everything except your name and that you were arriving yesterday." "There's not much to tell," Rosalie said, immediately liking her future sister-in-law. "I responded to your brother's advertisement, we exchanged letters for 2 months, and here I am." "Well, I'm thrilled he's finally getting married. That ranch house has been far too empty since our parents died." Rachel linked her arm through Rosalie's. "Come, I've convinced Mrs. Holloway to pack us a lunch. We're going for a walk and you're going to tell me everything about yourself." They strolled through Riverton, Rachel pointing out the general store, the blacksmith shop, the small schoolhouse where she taught 3 days a week. The town was larger than Rosalie had expected, with nearly 500 souls according to Rachel. "The railroad coming through 3 years ago changed everything," Rachel explained as they settled on a bench near the small town square. "Before that, Riverton was just a few buildings and a lot of hope. It seems prosperous now, growing steadily. My husband Thomas runs the general store, inherited it from his father last year when the old man decided to retire to Denver." Rachel's face softened at the mention of her husband. "We've been married for 4 years, best decision I ever made. How long has your brother been here?" Rosalie asked, curious about the man she was to marry. "We came with our parents when Yates was 16 and I was 11. They bought the ranch from a man who'd given up after 2 hard winters." Rachel shook her head. "Those first years were difficult, but Pa was determined. By the time they died wagon accident 6 years ago, the ranch was finally turning a profit." "I'm sorry about your parents." "Thank you. It was hard, especially on Yates. He had to take over everything at 24. Rachel unwrapped a sandwich and handed it to Rosalie. "He's a good man, my brother, stubborn as a mule sometimes, but honest to his bones." Rosalie took a bite, savoring the ham and fresh bread. "He seems kind, he is. Reserved, though. Our father was the same way, not one for unnecessary words." Rachel studied her thoughtfully. "Yates wouldn't tell me much about your situation, just that you'd had some trouble back east." Hesitantly, Rosalie shared her story: her father's failing business, her mother's illness followed by her father's, the debts that had forced her to sell their Philadelphia townhouse and nearly everything in it. "I worked as a seamstress after they died, but it wasn't enough," she explained. "When I saw your brother's advertisement, it seemed like Providence." "It was," Rachel said firmly. "For both of you, Yates needs someone to share his life with, not just the work of the ranch." "I don't know much about ranch life," Rosalie admitted, her deepest fear surfacing. "I'm afraid I'll disappoint him." Rachel squeezed her hand. "You'll learn. And Yates isn't the type to expect perfection from day one." They spent the afternoon shopping for a few necessities, sturdy boots better suited to ranch life, warm stockings, and practical undergarments. Rachel insisted on paying, waving away Rosalie's protests. "Consider it a wedding gift," she said. "Besides, Yates would skin me alive if I let his bride-to-be go without what she needs." When they returned to the hotel, Yates was waiting in the lobby, hat in hand. He rose when they entered, and Rosalie noticed the freshly pressed shirt and clean-shaven face. "Ladies," he greeted them. "Had a good day." "The best," Rachel replied. "Your bride is charming, Yates. Don't you dare mess this up." She kissed her brother's cheek, winked at Rosalie, and departed with a promise to return the following day. Alone with Yates, Rosalie felt suddenly shy. "Your sister is wonderful. She's something all right." His tone was dry but affectionate. "Would you care to take a walk before supper, Miss O'Keefe? There's something I'd like to show you." They strolled through town, Yates occasionally tipping his hat to passers-by. He didn't offer his arm as a city gentleman might, but he positioned himself between her and the rutted street, a gesture of protection she found oddly touching. "Here we are," he said finally, stopping before a modest white-painted church. "This is where we'll be married on Saturday." Rosalie stared at the simple building with its small steeple. Somehow, seeing it made everything real in a way it hadn't been before. "Would you like to see inside?" Yates asked, noting her expression. She nodded, unable to find her voice. He opened the door, ushering her into the hushed interior. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through plain glass windows, casting golden rectangles on the wooden pews. "It's lovely," she whispered. "Not grand like churches back east, I expect." "No, but—" She smiled up at him. "It feels peaceful." Something in his face relaxed. "That it does." They stood in silence for a moment before he spoke again. "Miss O'Keefe, Rosalie, if I may, I want you to know that I understand this isn't an easy thing you've done, coming all this way to marry a stranger. You're not exactly a stranger anymore, Mr. Quinn. Yates, please." He moved to stand before her, his expression solemn. "I want to be clear about what I'm offering. The ranch is good land, 800 acres, 200 head of cattle, a comfortable house. It's not a fortune, but it's secure." "I didn't come for fortune," she said quietly. "No, I don't believe you did." His gaze held hers. "I'm offering partnership, Rosalie. I need a wife, yes, but not just someone to cook and clean. I need someone to build a life with." The sincerity in his voice made her throat tighten. "I would like that very much." "Good." He cleared his throat. "There's something else." From his pocket, he withdrew a small box and opened it to reveal a simple gold band with a tiny pearl set into it. "It was my mother's," he explained. "I thought, well, every bride should have a ring." Rosalie stared at the delicate band, unexpected tears pricking her eyes. "It's beautiful." "You don't have to decide right now," he said quickly. "About marrying me, I mean. If you want more time or if you've changed your mind, I haven't changed my mind." The certainty in her voice surprised even herself. Relief washed over his features. "I'm glad to hear it." He carefully returned the ring to his pocket. "Shall we head back? Mrs. Holloway sets a good table." Over supper in the hotel dining room, they spoke more freely than before. Yates described the ranch, the main house with its wide front porch, the barn he'd expanded last summer, the creek that ran through the north pasture. "It's 4 miles from town," he said. "Close enough for convenience, far enough for privacy." "Do you have help? On the ranch, I mean." "2 hands, brothers named Miguel and Javier Sanchez. Good men, been with me 3 years now. They have a cabin near the barn." He took a sip of coffee. "They're usually too busy for socializing, but Miguel's wife Alina comes up to the main house sometimes to help with laundry and such." "I can manage household tasks," Rosalie assured him. "My mother made certain I knew how to run a home." Yates nodded. "I figured as much, but Alina's happy for the extra earnings. Her family's growing 4 children now." The easy way he spoke of his workers, with respect rather than condescension, told Rosalie more about his character than any direct statement could have. As they finished their meal, Yates asked about her journey west. "It was educational," she said diplomatically. I'd never traveled beyond Philadelphia before. Any trouble along the way, she hesitated, then decided honesty was the foundation they needed. In St. Louis, a man on the train became overly familiar. The conductor intervened. Yates's jaw tightened. I'm sorry that happened. It wasn't your fault. No, but I'm sorry nonetheless. His eyes met hers. You won't have to worry about such things here. People in Riverton respect each other for the most part, and those who don't, his smile didn't reach his eyes. They learn to or they move on. There was steel beneath his quiet demeanor, Rosalie realized. Not violence exactly, but an immovable certainty about right and wrong. It should have frightened her, perhaps, but instead she found it reassuring. They parted at the foot of the hotel stairs, Yates promising to return the following afternoon. Rachel's planned some kind of gathering at her home, he said, looking slightly pained. A ladies' tea to introduce you around before the wedding. Rosalie couldn't help smiling at his expression. You don't have to attend, surely? Thank the Lord, no. I'll be picking up supplies while you ladies do whatever it is you do at such things. Talk about the gentleman mostly, she teased. He raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Then I definitely don't want to be anywhere nearby. Their laughter, shared in that moment, felt like the first thread of something being woven between them, something that might, with care and time, become strong enough to build a life upon. The ladies' tea at Rachel's home the next day proved to be less intimidating than Rosalie had feared. A dozen women from Riverton welcomed her warmly, curious but not unkind in their questions about her background and her journey west. Yates Quinn is quite a catch, confided Mrs. Peterson, the banker's wife. Half the unmarried women in the county had their eye on him, but he never showed interest in any local girl. Married to that ranch of his, that's what everyone said, added Mrs. Whittaker, a plump woman with a ready laugh. We were all shocked when Rachel told us he'd sent away for a bride. Not that shocked, corrected Mrs. Taylor, the preacher's wife. A man needs a helpmate. The good book says it's not right for man to be alone. Rosalie sipped her tea, uncertain how to respond to these frank assessments of her future husband's eligibility. Rachel came to her rescue. My brother may be slow to make up his mind, but once he does, he's steadfast. He chose Rosalie's letters from dozens he received. This revelation startled Rosalie. Somehow, she hadn't considered that Yates might have had many responses to his advertisement. The thought that he'd selected her specifically, based solely on her words, gave her a warm feeling she couldn't quite name. The gathering shifted to wedding preparations, with offers of flowers from gardens, promises of baked goods, and discussions of music. By the time they dispersed, Rosalie felt genuinely welcomed into the community. See, not so terrible, Rachel said as they walked back toward town. They're good people for the most part. They seem very fond of your brother. Yates has earned their respect. 2 years ago, when drought hit and the Petersons' bank was calling in loans left and right, he organized the ranchers to drive their cattle to Cheyenne for better prices. Saved 3 families from losing everything. He didn't mention that, Rachel laughed. He wouldn't. Yates does what needs doing, but he doesn't talk about it after. When Yates collected her for supper that evening, he seemed more relaxed than before, as if her acceptance by the townspeople had eased some concern of his. I thought we might eat at the Silverado tonight, he suggested. Best food in town, and I reckon we've given the hotel gossips enough to talk about. The Silverado proved to be a surprisingly elegant restaurant for a frontier town, with white tablecloths and a piano player in the corner. This is lovely, Rosalie said as they were seated near a window overlooking the main street. I didn't expect such refinement in Riverton. Mrs. Ellington, she owns the place, came from Boston after her husband died, decided Wyoming needed some civilizing. Yates's mouth quirked. Some of the cowhands and miners complained at first about having to wear clean shirts to eat here, but nobody argues with her cooking. They ordered steaks with potatoes, and Yates surprised her by selecting a bottle of wine. A special occasion, he explained. Our last supper before becoming husband and wife. She felt heat rise to her cheeks at his direct acknowledgement of their impending marriage. "Are you nervous, Yates?" He considered the question seriously. "Not nervous exactly, mindful perhaps. Marriage is a weighty thing." "Yes, it is." She twisted her napkin in her lap. "I want to be honest with you. I'm not just marrying you to escape my circumstances, though that was certainly part of my decision. I want what you spoke of yesterday, a partnership, a life built together." His expression softened. "I believe you, Rosalie. And I promise to do my best to make sure you never regret your decision." They were interrupted by the arrival of their food, but the moment had shifted something between them, a deepening of understanding, an acknowledgement that they were both entering this union with eyes open. As they ate, Yates told her more about the ranch's daily operations, the seasonal rhythms of cattle raising, his hopes for expanding their herd over the next few years. "I've been setting aside money," he said. "Thought we might take a trip to Denver next spring after calving season. Get you some proper furniture for the house, whatever else you might want." "The house needs furnishing." He looked slightly abashed. "It's comfortable enough, but plain. My mother had some nice things, but after she died. Well, Rachel took what she wanted for her place, and I never saw the need to replace much." Rosalie smiled at his practical outlook. "I don't need fancy things, Yates, but I would like to make the house feel like a home." "That's exactly what it needs," he said, his voice warm. "What I need, if I'm being honest." After dinner, they walked slowly back toward the hotel, the spring evening pleasant around them. The streets were quieter now, most businesses closed for the night. "I've been thinking," Yates said as they approached the hotel. "After the wedding, we might stay in town Saturday night. The ranch will keep another day, and it might be nice to have some time, just us, before heading home." The implication was clear, and Rosalie felt her heartbeat quicken. "I would like that," she said softly. They paused at the hotel entrance. "2 more days," Yates said, his eyes holding hers. "2 more days," she echoed. He hesitated, then slowly leaned down to press a kiss to her cheek, his lips warm against her skin. "Good night, Rosalie." "Good night, Yates." She watched him walk away, his tall figure silhouetted against the lamplight. And for the first time since her parents' death, Rosalie felt something like happiness unfurling in her chest. Not because Yates Quinn could rescue her from poverty, though he would, but because in him, she sensed the possibility of something far more precious. A true partner for the journey ahead. Friday passed in a flurry of final preparations. Rosalie spent the morning with Rachel, who insisted on helping her prepare her wedding clothes and pack her trunk for the move to the ranch. "Yates wanted to bring you out there before the wedding," Rachel confided as she folded Rosalie's dresses, "so you could see where you'd be living. But I convinced him it would be bad luck." "Do you think he's worried I'll change my mind when I see it?" Rosalie asked, only half joking. "No, but my brother's a proud man in his quiet way. He wants you to approve of what he's built." Rachel handed her a neatly wrapped package. "This is from Thomas and me, a wedding gift." Inside was a beautiful cream-colored shawl, softer than anything Rosalie had touched in months. "It's lovely," she whispered, running her fingers over the delicate wool. "Thank you, you'll need it. Wyoming nights get cold, even in summer sometimes." Rachel's smile turned mischievous. "Though I suspect my brother will keep you warm enough." Rosalie blushed furiously, making Rachel laugh. "Oh, don't be embarrassed, it's a good thing being married, all of it." Her expression grew more serious. "Yates hasn't had much tenderness in his life since our parents died. He deserves it. So do you." That afternoon, Yates took her to see the judge, where they completed the necessary paperwork for their marriage license. The official business of their union felt strange names recorded in ledgers, documents signed and stamped, but it also made everything more real. As they left the courthouse, a commotion down the street caught their attention. A group of men had gathered outside the saloon, voices raised in anger. "Stay here," Yates said, his expression hardening as he recognized the disturbance. Before Rosalie could respond, he strode toward the group, his posture changing subtly, shoulders squared, steps measured and deliberate. She watched as he approached the loudest of the men, speaking too low for her to hear. Whatever he said caused the man to back down almost immediately, the tension in the group dissipating. When Yates returned, his face was calm again. "Sorry about that. What happened?" "Roy Dawson's been drinking since noon, gets mouthy when he's in his cups." He offered no further explanation, but Rosalie noticed how people on the street nodded respectfully to Yates as they passed. "Are you some kind of lawman?" she asked curiously. He looked surprised. "No, nothing like that. We have Sheriff Hammond for keeping order." "But you just stepped in as if it were your responsibility." Yates shrugged. "Everyone's responsibility to keep the peace. Hammond can't be everywhere." He glanced down at her. "Does that trouble you?" "No," she said thoughtfully. "It tells me what kind of man I'm marrying." His eyes searched her face. "And what kind is that?" "The kind who does what needs doing, as your sister would say." A slow smile spread across his face, transforming his serious features. "Rachel talks too much. She loves you," Rosalie said simply. "That she does." He hesitated. I hope you might come to feel something similar in time." The vulnerability in his voice touched her deeply. "I think perhaps I already do," she admitted. "Not love, not yet, but something growing toward it." His hand found hers, calloused fingers entwining with her smoother ones. "That's more than I dared hope for, Rosalie." They walked back to the hotel hand in hand, each lost in private thoughts about the promise of tomorrow. Saturday dawned clear and perfect, as if the Wyoming sky itself approved of their union. Rachel arrived at the hotel early, bringing with her Elena Sanchez to help Rosalie prepare. "I'm not much good with hair," Rachel admitted, "but Elena works wonders." Elena, a petite woman with warm brown eyes and capable hands, smiled shyly at Rosalie. "Miss Rachel says you will be our new senora. My husband Miguel says Senor Quinn has been smiling more this week than in all the years before." With their help, Rosalie bathed and dressed in her wedding gown, the ivory silk shimmering in the morning light. Elena arranged her dark hair in an elegant coiffure, weaving in sprigs of spring wildflowers that Rachel had gathered. "You look beautiful," Rachel said when they finished, her eyes suspiciously bright. "My brother won't know what hit him." At 11 o'clock they made their way to the church, which was already filled with townspeople. Rosalie waited in the small vestibule, heart pounding as Rachel went to take her seat. "Ready?" Sheriff Hammond had offered to escort her down the aisle in the absence of any family member. "Yes," Rosalie said, surprised to find she meant it completely. When the church door opened and she saw Yates waiting at the altar, tall and straight in a new black suit, his face solemn until he caught sight of her, any lingering doubts vanished. This man, this place, this life, this was where she belonged. The ceremony was brief but meaningful. They exchanged vows in clear voices, promised to cherish and honor one another, and when Yates slipped his mother's ring onto her finger, Rosalie felt tears of joy spill onto her cheeks. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the preacher declared. "You may kiss your bride." Yates cupped her face gently, his blue eyes holding a question. Rosalie answered by rising on tiptoe to meet his lips. Their first kiss was tender, a promise sealed before witnesses, and when they parted, the church erupted in applause. The celebration moved to the town hall, where tables groaned with food contributed by seemingly every household in Riverton. There was dancing, Yates proving surprisingly graceful despite his initial reluctance, and toasts, and more congratulations than Rosalie could count. As evening approached, they slipped away to the hotel where Yates had reserved the best room. Alone together at last, husband and wife stood facing each other in the soft lamplight. "Mrs. Quinn," Yates said softly, the name still new on his tongue. "Mr. Quinn," she returned, a smile playing at her lips. He reached out to touch a curl that had escaped her coiffure. "I meant what I said today. I will cherish you, Rosalie, all the days of my life. And I you." She stepped closer, placing her hands on his chest, feeling the strong beat of his heart beneath her palms. When he kissed her again, it was different from their kiss in the church, deeper, filled with longing held in check until now. Rosalie responded with equal fervor, all the emotions of the past days finding expression in their embrace. Later, as they lay entwined in the darkness, Yates traced lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "Happy," he murmured. "Very," she said, nestling closer. "Though I'm eager to see our home tomorrow." "Our home," he repeated, satisfaction evident in his voice. "I like the sound of that." The journey to the ranch the next morning took just under an hour in Yates's wagon. As they crested a small rise, he reined in the horses. "There it is." Rosalie caught her breath at the sight spread before them. The ranch house sat nestled in a gentle valley, a sturdy two-story structure with a wide porch wrapped around three sides. Behind it stood a large barn and several outbuildings, all well maintained. A creek wound through green pastures where cattle grazed contentedly, and in the distance, the mountains rose blue against the sky. "Oh, Yates," she breathed. "It's beautiful." Relief washed over his features. "You really think so? It's the most perfect place I've ever seen." He smiled then, the full, unguarded smile she was coming to treasure. "Welcome home, Rosalie." As they approached the house, she saw that someone, Alina, probably had decorated the porch railing with wildflowers and ribbons. A hand-painted sign hung from the door, "Welcome, Mrs. Quinn." Yates helped her down from the wagon, then surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "Tradition," he explained, carrying her across the threshold. Inside, the house was indeed plain but solidly built and scrupulously clean. A large stone fireplace dominated the sitting room, comfortable if worn furniture arranged before it. The kitchen was spacious with a new cookstove, and upstairs, their bedroom featured a large four-poster bed covered with a colorful quilt. "My mother made that," Yates said, watching her run her hand over the intricate stitching. "Said every married couple should sleep under something made with love." Rosalie turned to face him, her heart full. "I came with nothing but hope," she said softly, "but you've given me so much more." "You gave me everything I needed," he countered, drawing her close. "A partner, a future." He kissed her gently. "Love, Rosalie, that's worth more than gold." 5 years later, Rosalie stood on that same porch, watching as Yates lifted their 3-year-old son William onto his first pony. Beside her, baby Catherine slept peacefully in her cradle, oblivious to her brother's excited shouts. The ranch had prospered under their joint care. They'd expanded the herd, added 2 more hands to help with the increasing workload, and made the house truly their home with furniture crafted by the town's carpenter, and touches that reflected Rosalie's Eastern refinement and Yates's Western practicality. Rachel and Thomas had moved to Cheyenne the previous year when Thomas opened a second store there, but they visited often, their 2 children playing happily with William. "Not too fast," Rosalie called as Yates led the pony in a small circle. "Your mama worries too much," Yates told William with a wink in her direction. "Mama always worries," William agreed solemnly, his blue eyes so like his father's serious beneath his small hat. Rosalie laughed. "Someone has to balance your father's wild ways." Yates handed the pony's lead rope to Miguel, who had been watching the lesson with amusement, and climbed the porch steps to join his wife. "Wild ways?" he questioned, wrapping an arm around her waist. "Mrs. Quinn, I believe you're confusing me with someone else." "Never," she said, leaning into his embrace. "I know exactly who you are, Yates Quinn." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "And who might that be?" Rosalie turned in his arms, rising on tiptoe just as she had on their wedding day. "The man who saw value in hope when I had nothing else to offer. The man who gave me a home, a family, a future." She kissed him softly. "The man I love more each day," his arms tightened around her. "Best bargain I ever made." As the Wyoming sun began its descent toward the mountains, casting long shadows across their land, Rosalie Quinn knew with absolute certainty that the hope she'd carried west had been transformed into something far more precious, a love as enduring as the land itself, and just as rich with promise.